Mexico. Today, it's known for its vibrant colonial architecture, second-to-none cuisine, and exuberant culture. But if you were to turn the clock back just a few centuries, you'd find yourself in the heyday of one of the Americas' greatest empires.
The Aztecs. Nahuatl was their language. But what was it like? What happened to it? And is there any legacy of it still left today? Spoken in a region which is now Mexico City, Nahuatl has been spoken since at least the 7th century AD. Part of the Uto-Aztecan branch of the Aztec-Tanoan language family, Nahuatl, starting in around 1430, began to develop a prestigious sociolect, today known as Classical Nahuatl, the best attested form of the language. And it's the variety of the language that we'll be looking at in the most detail. At the time of the Spanish conquest, Nahuatl was written using a pictographic script, known as the Aztec or Nahuatl script. However, upon the Spanish invasion and successive demonization of the Aztec script, the Latin script was gradually adopted by the Nahua in order to record a vast corpus of both prose and poetry. At least before the Spanish invasion, poetry was inextricably connected with singing and music, song being a key element of Nahua culture. Before the church, claiming that they were somehow blasphemous, terminated this tradition. You'll be relieved to hear though, that we do still have some records of what these poems were like. This being an example. This poetry was notoriously perplexing, and even to its contemporaries was quite the challenge, with random syllables being slotted in to fit the meter, obscure metaphors, and the texts themselves tremendously abstract. There also existed a grand library in Texcoco containing hundreds of codices, books, and records written by the Aztecs as well as other Mesoamerican civilizations such as the Xochimilco. This was all before they were burned by this guy, a Spanish bishop called Juan de Zumárraga. What was the language even like? Well, we know the language was both agglutinative as well as polysynthetic, meaning it used really long words containing lots of affixes. In other words, nouns could be combined with nouns as well as verbs, and verbs with other verbs. In terms of grammar, Nahuatl had essentially 3 word order, with subjects, and in many cases even nouns, being optional. And instead of case or gender, nouns were distinguished by whether they were animate or inanimate. The difference being important, as only animate nouns could be pluralized. And nouns which were neither possessed nor pluralized appeared in the absolutive form, being composed of a stem plus one of these endings. There also existed the following noun forms: the reverential, diminutive, and pejorative. Verbs in Nahuatl could represent action, inaction, states, characteristics, relationships and emotions. And these verbs consisted of a verbal root, with prefixes indicating person and mood, and suffixes for the different tenses, aspects, and moods. Nahuatl had 3 tenses:
The present,
past, and future. But the language is often described as having these 5 basic tenses, with the preterite expressing a completed action in the past, and the transitory preterite expressing actions in the past which have somehow been reversed. Here's a summary of how the 5 main tenses were formed.
On top of these 5 main tenses, there also existed directional tenses.
In these cases, the verb was often accompanied by the following auxiliaries. There were also separate endings to determine the transitivity of verbs, and reflexive verbs, which took the object prefix mo.
In terms of mood,
as well as the aforementioned indicative, there existed a combined imperative-subjunctive mood, expressing commands, advice, requests, or authorizations.
I've linked an article in the description if you'd like to find out more.
These were the basic personal pronouns. Notice the difference between exclusive and inclusive second-person plural pronouns, which are used depending on whether or not the listener is meant to be included. There were also forms of the personal pronouns, which weren't words in and of themselves, instead taking the form of prefixes. But wait, how could I have forgotten the phonology? These were the consonants, with there also existing these 4 short vowels, as well as these long vowels. Despite the numbers that speak it, due to the associated stigma, the language is no longer being passed down to the next generation. And it's for that reason that the language is considered
critically endangered,
which is honestly quite saddening. That being said, Nahuatl has had a mild impact on English through the following loanwords.
Anyway, that's all for this week. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tune in for next week's episode.